Okay, so this is just going to be a quick walkthrough of how I put this box together and how I overcame some of the problems that I had along the way. I'm not sure I'm doing it properly yet, but I have got a half reasonable light box out of it. And some people have asked how I've generated the different images that I use to generate the box. So I thought it'd be quicker and easier to just go through a bit of a walkthrough, really. So I'm going to be going from the guide, but to begin with, I'm going to generate my own text. Now, I found that if I put black text on a white background, that didn't seem to work. I also tried to put white text on a grey background, which still worked, but it meant I had to deviate from the instructions slightly. But what I did find is that white text on a black background worked really well. So I'll start by adjusting my document properties in Inkscape. Change the background color to just be black, sorry. It looks kind of transparent here, but it isn't. The alpha channel is full. I'm just going to drop some text in. I used lobster in my demo, but I also had a look at this one, Belly Nice. Looks quite interesting as well, if you want to check that out. And so I've got my text there. Now, one couple of pitfalls you want to look out for here. It's not immediately obvious, but this S is lower than everything else. So if you're going to print this, it's going to sit at an angle. So what you want to do is convert this object to a path. And then I'm using Control, Shift, and G to ungroup these things. You can achieve the same effect by double clicking it as well, I think. And now you can select each individual object. And what we want to do is lower all of these onto the same plane, which I've used Align and Distribute. You can get to that here. And we're just going to flatten everything. So they're all nice and on the same level now. The other thing is that all of these letters need to touch each other. I think in the guide it says to use WordPad and condensed spacing. But instead, if we hold Control, it's going to keep that nice and level on the same plane as we slide it around. And we just want it touching as far as looks good, really. And that's really going to be up to you how far you want to move it. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Another pitfall is that if you were to select these objects and then export this as an image, there would be no gap between the lettering and the edge of the image, and I'll just do that now to demonstrate. Just getting that image up on my other monitor. There we go. So this is what we just exported. And because these edges of the characters are touching the edge, that's going to mess up with some of the functions that we want to use later on. So the way around this is to just use the box tool, draw a box around the edge. We'll make that box transparent by using the object fill and stroke. Just going to turn the alpha channel right down, and I'm going to disable the stroke color. Now if I export this instead, you can see we get that bit of a border. Now it's quite low resolution this, so I'm going to pump that up a bit. Yeah, I don't think there's any guidance on how high resolution this should be. I think the guide just says to zoom right in and then screen cap it till it fills your monitor. So assuming you're using a 1080 monitor, that would be about this size. So let's export that. And there it is again, looking a bit more crisp. Cool. So now we're actually starting the guide portion of it now. And we need to start by bringing up a 2D window. And I'm just going to navigate to that file that I created. Lots of different attempts in here, but that's the one we just made. So the first thing that we want to do is use Tool, Geometry, and Distance Transform. We just leave that as default. If you have used white text on a grey background, you'll need to change this, but white on black, this will work fine. And you get something that looks like this. New window appears, and in this we can use the threshold tool. You can change this value to get a thinner outline. I'm not really sure what difference that makes on the result, but there we go, we've got this. So we want to save this off now. Just going to create a new folder here. Cool, so now we can move over to the 3D window. We'll open that up. Oh no, we won't. We'll create Photo Magic and Box, and then we'll browse to our image. And we get something that looks like this. First thing we want to do is set this to inlay and inner pattern indent. Now the thickness there, I'm going to turn down to just 2 millimeters. You can see that this section of the O is filled in. And so the way to fix this, really easy, just in MS Paint. I just took the fill tool, filled that in white, save that back over itself, and then we can reopen the image. And you see it looks a bit like this. Now the reason we want that is because when we come to 3D print this lid, we want this portion to sit higher than the rest of the letters. That allows us to switch filament halfway through and print this bit in black so as to mask out the light coming from behind it. So I'll just save that off. Come over to your favorite slicer. And we'll import that. We don't need the lid pattern. So that gives us two files, the base and the lid. Base is fairly straightforward, just print it in whatever orientation makes sense for you. I would suggest this orientation. A point to note though, and I skipped this actually in LuBan, but if you're going to 3D print it, I would look for a tolerance of 0.5. Now that looks massive on there, but it isn't in reality. It will be quite a close fit, I think. Yeah, otherwise the parts probably won't fit together. And the other point to note is when you're creating that tolerance is that is going to subtract from this edge here. You can see in this model, it's actually made the edge a bit thinner. The reason I mention that is because if you've got an extrusion head on your printer of 0.4 millimeters, if you go below that, your slicer is not going to be able to print that line because it's too thin for the extrusion head to print out. So do bear that in mind, depending on how you're planning on manufacturing it. Okay, so they're just the points to note with the base. Get rid of that. Yeah, and so when it comes to this, we want to print this raised section in a darker color to mask out the light. Now, if you're using the latest version of Prusa Slicer, it will suggest doing this for you. You can see there, apply color change automatically. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to assume that you're not using the latest version. So we simply come down till we find the point that we want to start printing a different color, which for me is here. Right click, add a color change. And it's going to look something like this, although this orange color is going to be transparent for me. Cool, so I hope that helped. If anyone's got any questions, just let me know. And if anyone's got any suggestions on how to do this better, that would be awesome as well, because really, I feel like this is cheating a bit, just filling this section in black and this one. Really, I'd want that to extend back into the body and be a real hollow, but this is my workaround at the minute, and if it works for you, that's great. So yeah, thanks for everyone's help when I was getting through this, and yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know.